All right, good morning, people. Bob here, back once again, ready to break down some Bitcoin. Happy Friday Eve. Let's get right down to it. Start out on a daily chart like we like to do. We've been talking about this for a few days now, really, ever since we were basically here looking to get over top of this level, and then now we're over top of it. Now we're trying to hold it. Couple different things here. So, based on this chart, we're getting stopped out at this 236 fib level here, which is at 24,000. And when I get over to my other charts, you're going to see that number lines up to another fib level on a chart. But really more importantly for me, I like seeing that we got a decent bounce off of here as we came back to test it. Now, what we don't want to see is a closure below this level at this stage. I mean, really, ideally, you don't even close below here at all. And I think, again, if we're going to mirror the price action on this side, there's still a feasibility that we do wick down here, which could potentially be logical because that would give us a back test of the 21 simple here on the daily chart. But really, and I'll show you, right now, Bitcoin's at 22.8 and change. And I'll show you where that level is important on another chart. But again, we've talked about this a little bit, if not a lot a bit, that these are the levels that were important. And right now we're above them. So this is good. But we got to hold them in order to keep this upside push going. If we're going to make our move towards, 28, 20, 29,000, 30,000. If we're going to make that move, we gotta be able to hold up here. Now, this already looks better than some of the other attempts in the past. Here we really never even. Now, granted, this is a daily chart that's in the past, so it's not as easy to see. But I mean, you'll see here that really at no point recently has Bitcoin made any attempt to hold levels after making moves like this. Here was another perfect example of a time where, if you guys remember this one, I remember we were all pretty excited when this thing broke up above here, which, if I recall correctly, this was actually this move right here on the weekly chart was where Bitcoin got back above its 50-week moving average after it had fallen below it. And it had never done that in the history of Bitcoin. And then, here you get this basically a massive fake out. But it made really, well, I guess it did make some level of attempt to hold this level. So I guess the question becomes, is it going to be something where we've got to try and hold it for several days? Or is a simple retest of that level sufficient? Because a lot of times when you get these patterns right here, like this is almost like an inverse hammer kind of a deal. A lot of times you will get a secondary move towards the high from the day prior. So I think at the very least 23.8 is a number that we could potentially expect to see today again. Whether we end up actually eclipsing that and making a move up here is another story. But today's Thursday, right? We talked about it plenty of times in the past. Thursday through Saturday, Thursday through Sunday tend to get good price action out of Bitcoin. So I think there's some feasibility that maybe actually this thing does hold on here. Maybe it even pops up out of here today and then makes another run of 24. Who knows? Maybe we go into the weekend with 24K support and we legitimately are making our way all the way up here. Let's see. Let's actually get the weekly pulled up here. Now, the interesting thing is this morning, so like last night, Bitcoin had been sitting above this level and just kind of bouncing off of it for quite some time, actually. And then this morning, it fell below it briefly. It fell at like 22.4 and then bounced right back off. Now it's back above the 200 simple moving average for the weekly chart. And that's really going to be our litmus test, if you will. Like, if this holds this today, then I'll be much more inclined to believe we do, in fact, start making our way up here over the weekend. Crack this 236 fib level. Do I think that over the course of this weekend, we're going to fly all the way up here to like a 618 or a 702. No, not. See, that seems highly unlikely, but maybe a move up here into this 27K range, and not necessarily by Sunday, but maybe we actually close out the week. Definitely, at least we got to close it out above here. This is like the closing it out above the 200 is a huge deal, right? But even better would be if we close it out up here and then come back and back test it after this week closes out. If need be, I'd like to think we don't even need to back test it again after we're sitting on it right now. But either way, I mean, again, and let's go ahead and talk about the MACD histogram here, right? It's moving this direction. As we dealt with over here, as it started to move and the sell pressure became lesser, you did start to see nice green candles come up out of there. Now, granted, by the time it got there, and we maxed out the top of the move, immediately thereafter, you could see that it was losing steam already. Now, is this one going to flip green and start looking more like this over here, where we actually put in many weeks straight of fairly positive price action during this period of time? Time will tell. But I think that there's some reason to believe that it can and or will. But we'll see. Again, this is showing bearish divergence across the chart here on the weekly. One thing I hadn't really looked at that closely before, but I was taking a look this morning, and I had to redo some of my chart details. And, this falling wedge here on the RSI, we actually did fall out of it, double bottomed on the outside of it. Now we're back inside of it. So I do think that looking at the chart, as long as, in fact, we do close out the week in excess of 22, above here, whatever it's 22.7, 22, whatever that number exactly is, right? I don't care what the exact number is, but we want to close above here this week, and ideally we close above, like this level here, and then what you would see is this thing would start out the week, potentially coming up, but then at some point maybe comes back down, test this bottom line here, and let's zoom in a little bit, come down here, test this bottom line, and granted it may have already, realistically, it may have already done that in this week's candles, started out down and then popping up. So, again, we could see this thing just keep going, right? Like, here's an example of a time where it did that. Nice double bottom, and then boom. So, I mean, there's precedence for it, right? I think that it's feasible that we do see this thing zip up all the way over the course of the next several weeks. Maybe we could see this thing zip all the way back up here. It's still in bear control, right? I mean, it's not even in this neutral territory. It's in full bear control. But I mean, again, we could see that. Now, if we saw that, what does that work out to, right? Well, we've gone through this before too. That basically this. One of these two lines here, maybe this one, the yellow one, or this green one, would be representative of this line here crossing through the RSI. Assuming that, then again, totally logical if this thing is to go all the way up here, totally logical to believe that we cross this line, at least come up to, if not cross it. And let me move this out a little bit just to kind of, let's call only that section the fake out. So then maybe potentially this, so I'd say realistically, things go accordingly. I would not be surprised if we are seeing a 30K, 27 to 30K Bitcoin within really the next 2 weeks, right? Like you could see where that could be logical here. Now, again, it's still got to come up, then find support here. Then all of a sudden we're talking about, retracement back into these levels, 33-ish thousand. And I think at least in the quote unquote short term, we'll say that would be my highest initial upside target, and probably more realistically even like this 32 level, but something in between here. And then, maybe we come back up, catch this here, roll down, retest one of these supports, and then boom. And again, all this stuff would take weeks and weeks, if not months, to play out. But now this vertical line deal that you see here is a time-based Fibonacci. And you'll see here that, it didn't nail it perfectly. And really, I don't know, it doesn't nail these things totally perfectly every time. But, you'll see here that there is some logic to, like, all right, well, across this line, that's going to change direction. It changed direction here, and then it came down. So we've got this line approaching here, December of 22. And the question will end up being is, are we going to see positive price action up to that line, or do we have to stay sideways and garbagey all the way up until that point? Again, it's time-based fib, but there are different ways I could put this on here. I mean, I could extend this all the way back to, say, the COVID-19 low, which changes everything totally, right? So then you get this peak here. Okay, change the direction here. Maybe makes some sense. You finish out this downward move. Now we've got months where we could go upward, potentially all the way into June next year. So that might be something that I'll take a look at and see if I can't get it to line up a little better with how things have actually, like this could be a decent spot too. Actually, this one could be the one here. Let's move this back to the peak there. Yeah, I think that actually let's lock that one in. So I think that'll do it. So yeah, you had this initial peak here from the initial all-time high, change of direction here from this high, and then change of direction here. Now, don't get caught up on how far out this guy is, but again, it's September next year. Some feasibility. Anyway, so this could be our change of direction. Again, we could get some positive price action in here. Who knows? Maybe it does go for the next year and change. We're coming down here from way in this oversold territory. It could spend the next year going all the way up and over and finally maxing out on the weekly here. We'll see what happens. But all right, let's get this thing wrapped up. We've spent 13 minutes, and I don't know that we've really discussed a whole lot yet, besides the potential for some upside targets and such. But let's zoom in here on the action a little bit and kind of talk about some of these other Fibonacci levels. This one's not quite as helpful, but the thing that I would say is if we take this line here and we look across, we've got this green line here. Right now, it is sitting below these levels here, which means that Bitcoin is potentially flipping these into resistance as we're sitting here talking. Now, it is still above most of these levels, well, all of them really, but other than this guy right here, it's above all these other levels, so that's a positive. But again, I would not be surprised to see this thing come down and tap into here. And again, we can go back to the daily chart that we use, and we could talk about that one more time, actually. And just the let's get that pulled up here. But yeah, but again, kind of bringing this chart back over just real briefly, it's like we're talking about here. We could potentially see it wick down here. Now, what I think would be the most ideal still would just be to not fall below this level. 21.8's kind of got to be our line in the sand, I would say. Although I still think feasible that we see a wick come down here or even here. Just don't want to see it. And I failed to point this out earlier. Within our rising broadening wedge, there is this little rising channel of sorts, which is what we're looking at right here, basically. It's sitting right here, and it's sitting in this area where I have my chart marked where Bitcoin, even though it's not bullish control territory right here, it seems to, when it gets above this level, this is where it seems to flip to potentially be bullish. Like over here, you can see where it was bouncing off the 60 level. That's where it was already bullish. But for whatever reason, this line here, I feel is a good representation of where most of the action, if it's not going to reach bullish potential, this is the line where it kind of draws, puts it in the sand there. So we'll see. But either way, my point to bringing this chart back was just to revisit these levels here. And again, we've tested these ones out already. So ideally, we come down. If we're going to test another one out, it's right here. But ideally, again, we're not coming down below any of this stuff. None of these guys. I just don't know if that's going to be the case. We do have this bearish divergence here. You can see the last bearish divergence. We went into about a 5-day downtrend. This already looks fairly similar, but none of this is a given yet. Today is not over, but we are losing that 22.8 level, so we'll see. All right, coming back to this chart though, real briefly, 4-hour chart again. We're losing some levels at the moment. I'd prefer to not see that we lose, but again, if we're gonna do it, let's come down here, maybe get a nice bounce off of this level, this 21.7-ish level. And again, that would fairly well coincide with most of the stuff over here and the lows from here. And then again, ideally, I don't want to see us come all the way back down and put in a tap down here, but feasible, realistic, etc. One thing I did find interesting, this little 4-hour RSI here, it does look like it would like to come back up. It's trying to make an attempt, but again, it fell below the area that I have marked as the bullish potential zone. We're into neutral territory, and it's, at this stage, it's probably more likely that this thing will roll back down either this candle or the next 4-hour candle, just looking it over. I will be highly impressed if it finds a way to recover these levels. Because I think, again, it's much more likely that we're coming back down into this level, just from a realistic standpoint. And again, as long as it gets bought up and then we close out in the right area, that's not a huge deal. What becomes problematic is in the event that we come down here and then all of a sudden now we say flip this into resistance, this level right here. Now all of a sudden this thing becomes a head and shoulder pattern. And now the downside target would be somewhere down here. So, even though it's been fun watching all this upside here recently, I'd say at the moment, not all sunshine and rainbows or whatever the lollipops or whatever the saying is. Anyway, all right. But yeah, so there are a few things here that I don't necessarily love that I'm seeing. And then this chart here is actually one that I think is pretty important for our sake here, because this is dealing with our most recent price action and what's happened since the most recent fall from grace, right? And this one's got the 0 fib is directly on the lowest point that it got to, and then the 1 fib is at the exact point where it was prior to capitulation. So I think that this particular chart is good for the sake of using these fib levels. And you can see here it's been nice. We had this initial touch here. We recovered, we eventually did recover and hold a 236 fib level. And then we made our way all the way up here to the 618. What I'd like to see and what I at this point, we talked about kind of the idea that this is maybe a big cup, and then this is going to be our handle. Well, then we just need to get a good strong bounce somewhere over on this side to make our next move up, and then we want to start looking for a 702, a 786. But sometimes these rejections can be tough, and then you do start coming all the way back down. So we'll keep an eye out on all that, trade the trend as we do. And then let's just go ahead and wrap this thing up here. Now, this is my short-term chart. I got the 15-minute chart here. This thing's just a mess, honestly. Over the last 24 hours or so, or really not even 24. I mean, this is, about 12 hours worth of data here. Like, it didn't play out quite the way I expected it to. And then it's kind of got this, like, bearish fake out, then a bullish. Who knows? But I do think that looking at this chart on the 15-minute, and not that I I look at this and think, oh man, yeah, this is going to do it. These these very short time frames, but I mean, this 15-minute crash pattern is nearly complete. It's got to get back over this level. I mean, it's got to recover this 22,750 and hold it. Get over this 21 simple on the 15-minute. Once it does, then I'll feel a lot better about where we might be heading in the short term, and the idea that maybe we do end up having a pretty good weekend. That maybe this thing does just keep firing off to the upside. So we shall see. I think that pretty well does it. It all just depends what happens in here. I mean, I could see us, again, I could see coming down anywhere down as far as to here, potentially, but ideally not any further down than, say, this level right here. So really even probably this one, this 21.9, almost 22,000 is the spot that I'd like to see hold up. I honestly thought it was heading there last night, which is why I'm saying that the price action just there's something off about it that's just making it difficult to tell exactly what we've got here. But as long as if we can get back on top of this trend line too, that's a win. And then we can start popping up and blast off out of here. So, let's see if this weekend is the one that we can get up to 25, 26, 27,000, and watch these alts really take off during this time too. We appreciate you as always. Look forward to catching up tomorrow.